Hello and welcome to another rousing edition of Trending Topics with BB. I am your humble host, Brooke Brown, hence the BB. Well, we are back for another check with the podcast. But before I get into a little bit about what this episode will be, I want to remind you to log on to the official website, trendingtopicswithbbpodcast.com, if you haven't already. Good news is that if you are listening to this podcast on any platform, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn, Player FM, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, Podbean, really basically where any podcast can be found, you have found it in some way, whether you Googled Trending Topics with BB or article, a link out there in the interwebs led you to this podcast. I want to thank you if you are a new listener and subscriber. And that reminds me, if you are one of these and you are on any of those platforms that I mentioned that allow you to leave a favorable rating and comment, please do so. It helps the algorithm find this podcast and maybe other listeners like you. And again, thank you for listening to this podcast. Also, I want to remind you, if you are on the website trendingtopicswithbbpodcast.com, click on the merchandise link that'll lead you to our T Public store, and you can really own a piece of merch with this podcast logo. It helps. I get a portion of proceeds of any of the sales from that. And also, it'd just be cool to see the logo out somewhere in the world. Perhaps if you buy some stickers and place them somewhere random in the world, it'd be hilarious just to be like, oh, there's a podcast. Or what is Trending Topics with BB? And then people Google it and find the podcast. So if you are a fan of this podcast and want to help support this podcast, please order some merch. And like I said, if you just go to trendingtopicswithbbpodcast.com and click on the merchandise tab, you'll be able to do so. All right, now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I wanted to check in. It's been a while since I published a new episode. I've been working during this whole quarantine time to reach out to guests that have been on this podcast to return on a future date, as well as new guests that I've been working on getting on this podcast for almost 2 years now, and also reaching out to potential other guests. So be on the lookout for new interviews and conversations to be posted soon, but I felt the need to check in now. I'm finding that the longer we have to stay at home and be quarantined and deal with whatever situation that be, and I will preface with this, I've been lucky to have my full-time job and work from home. I know there's a lot of people out there that are in dire needs because they lost their job because of all of the closures. I feel for you, and hopefully as things start opening up, state by state, people can get back to work, get some sort of normality back in their life, help their families, their friends, and hopefully we can get past whatever this pandemic has been. But I feel like along those lines, whether you have been able to stay employed or whether you are bored out of your fucking mind at this point because you don't know what the futures hold, you're filing for unemployment, you're barely getting by, maybe you have a loved one who's either sick, which I feel for you, and hopefully they survive said virus, or you have somebody, or you yourself might be a nurse or some sort of healthcare provider, and you're having to work ridiculous hours in this time, or if you are a restaurant worker or delivery driver that is having to work right now, awesome, and kudos to you for the stress you're having to endure. However, I believe that no matter what situation you find yourself in throughout the world, that mental health is inevitably going to be the downfall along with the economic downfall that we find ourselves in right now. Because I'm just noticing that along with boredom and uncertainty and any other factors, people are losing their fucking minds in many different ways. And that is contributing to even more turmoil and just overall problems going on right now in terms of people don't know what to fucking do with themselves. And it could also just be that for those that may have lost their jobs, you're unable to maybe afford to get your medication or to treat yourself. Maybe you're unable to get some sort of help through therapy. However, I did notice that there's one of the apps, I think it's either, don't quote me on it, either Headspace or one of those, that announced recently that if you're one of the millions of unemployed people, you can sign up for their service and they will not charge you for their service if you need to talk to somebody for your mental health. So I just want to get the word out for anybody that maybe feels like even though you're talking to friends and family, it's not helping you with your mental health. You're losing your mind. Maybe you've started some habits that may not be healthy. Maybe you're drinking more. Maybe you're indulging in some sort of other substance during this time. Check out Headspace, which is an app you can download that get you virtual online therapy sessions with certified therapists. And if you're unemployed, you may, like I said, qualify for the service where they don't charge you for these sessions. So please look into that. But I just wanted to do a little mental health check for those that listen to this podcast that know that I've talked about mental health on this podcast with guests in other solo episodes where I talk about my own struggles in the past. But I wanted to do a little mental health check because I think that in the long run, after it's all said and done and the virus is somewhat sort of controlled, whether it's a vaccine, whether it's not a vaccine, whether it's just the fact that we've all maybe had it by now and our bodies are now getting immune to it, there's still going to be consequences getting out in mental health because maybe there's many different factors, but there's an issue in terms of maybe you realize that how you were leading your life before this lockdown is not exactly ideal. Maybe you're going through like a struggle of like a little midlife crisis and you're not even in that time of your life yet. Or maybe you're just dealing with family and friends and the stress that they're dealing with and want to help other people and other people aren't taking your help. There's many different ways that somebody's mental health could be going down, or in some cases just being very difficult during this time. And being somebody that understands struggle with mental health because I've had depression in the past, I have anxiety, I have issues in sort of like expressing myself sometimes. So my problem is that I like kind of suppress my own anger, feelings, and issues to the point that, like, at the end of the day, it builds and builds and builds over time and then can cause issues in sort of other ways. So I really wanted to check in with any listeners out there and see if this maybe might help. I know that we live in a society, actually a worldwide society, where people feel it's taboo to talk about mental health, talk about getting help, because, you know, there's been many excuses. Oh, well, I can't afford therapy, which is why I gave you the option and information about logging on to Headspace and seeing if you can't qualify for their free service right now, or talking to somebody, a family friend that you trust, or even if it's just not like that, maybe just figuring out maybe a hobby, but a positive hobby that you can like focus your mind and body, and maybe it's just taking a meditation or listening to more music a day instead of any social media or constant bullshit in the media in terms of what's going on, because there's really so much contradictory information out there right now that may be just stressing people out because they think they may know the answers, but in reality nobody seems to know what the fuck is going on. So in this mental health check, I just want anybody that listens to this podcast or will listen to this podcast, maybe think about it. Think about how you're feeling. Maybe you realize that maybe some of your recent behavior or maybe past behavior was due to some sort of issue with depression, anxiety, or both in some cases, or anything. It just may have just popped up during the stresses we're enduring now, during this pandemic, during the lockdown orders, during the fact that maybe you're running out of TV shows to watch, or you're not knowing how to pass the time, and so you're maybe binge eating or drinking or whatever it is that you might have not had the habit before all of this took place. I suggest maybe taking a deep breath and trying to figure out how you can help yourself. Because when it comes to mental health, as much as it's really good to seek help from other people, the main lesson I've learned in my life is that you have to want the help and you have to know how to invite the help, whatever the help may be, whether it's therapy, medication, some sort of hobby. As people that listen to this podcast may well know, I'm very passionate about music, and music has been helping me get through this pandemic. On average, I probably listen to about 5 to 6 hours of music a day, and that's on the least end of things. Also, podcasts, audiobooks have been really good in terms of being able to calm down, to fall asleep. I have Audible, or perhaps going on YouTube and finding some sort of like relaxation music mixes or videos that you find relaxing. Anyway, so to sum up this episode, I just wanted to do a little mental health check because I have noticed my mental health has been getting a little weird, and I feel that as much as I can be, maybe me explaining the issues I'm having with my own mental health and options I've seen published, like the Talkspace app or the Headspace app, one of those, Google it, may help. But I just wanted to reach out to those that may need some sort of encouragement to seek help, because I'm noticing people's behavior out and about kind of lends to the fact that everybody's losing their goddamn mind and just doesn't give a fuck anymore. And we need to kind of like rein it in, because eventually things are going to open back up, and then we don't want it to get to a point where it's so chaotic it's going to cause even more problems. So, to sum up, I just wanted to do a little mental health check episode and to kind of update you on things you can do to kind of help support me in this podcast, but also help yourself in mental health. So hopefully this has been a helpful little checkup, and there will be new episodes coming up with lovely guests. But until then, please take care of yourselves and have a happy Memorial Day weekend, or whenever you will be listening to this podcast episode.